Hello everyone and welcome to week 15 of our English Introduction to Literature class. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to use this video lecture to talk a little bit about the assignments for this week and then prepare you for next week, which will be our final week of the semester. This week we're going to finish up our work with poetry, and I've provided about 7 different poems, some of them fairly famous ones from different poets. And I want you to read them, consider them, think about the questions that we talked about last week. What is that moment that the poet gets us closer to? What's that thing that the poet lets us look through a piece of glass into? What is the poet trying to express about life? With Billy Collins, I think hopefully you found, that his poems usually start with a small, tiny moment and then expand to a much bigger idea at the end of the poems. Now, this is one of them from last week. I think I posted this reading as well, but if you did get a chance to watch it, here we go.
A few more about what American children tend to do in the summer often. It's called the Lanyard. And it's a poem, I guess, with it, what most poets tend to do, which is if you want to write about a topic that's rather large, you choose kind of an image as a point of entry, rather than taking on the topic in a frontal way. So, the Lanyard. The other day, as I was ricocheting slowly off the pale blue walls of this room, bouncing from typewriter to piano, from bookshelf to an envelope lying on the floor, I found myself in the L section of the dictionary, where my eyes fell upon the word Lanyard. No cookie nibbled by a French novelist could send one more suddenly into the past, a past where I sat at a workbench at a camp by a deep Adirondack lake, learning how to braid thin plastic strips into a lanyard, a gift from my mother. I had never seen anyone use a lanyard, or wear one if that's what you did with them, but that did not keep me from crossing strand over strand again and again, until I had made a boxy red and white lanyard for my mother. She gave me life and milk from her breasts, and I gave her a lanyard. She nursed me in many a sick room, lifted teaspoons of medicine to my lips, set cold face cloths on my forehead, and then led me out into the airy light and taught me to walk and swim, and I in turn presented her with a lanyard. Here are thousands of meals, she said, and here is clothing and a good education. And here is your lanyard, I replied, which I made with a little help from a counselor. Here is a breathing body and a beating heart, strong legs, bones, and teeth, and 2 clear eyes to read the world, she whispered. And here, I said, is the lanyard I made at camp. And here, I wish to say to her now, is a smaller gift, not the archaic truth that you can never repay your mother, but the rueful admission that when she took the 2-tone lanyard from my hands, I was as sure as a boy could be that this useless, worthless thing I wove out of boredom would be enough to make us even.
All right, that's one of my favorite poems by him, The Lanyard. Now here we see, just like he says before he read the poem, instead of presenting the reader with a big idea right off the bat, you start with something small. And that's an avenue and a road into the idea. And with this poem, we start with the idea of language. Interestingly enough, he writes a lot about language. He's a poet. And so he starts with finding this word in a dictionary and actually having this word sending his mind spiraling back into his memories. It's interesting to consider what words might do that for you. I have some places in my life that I've traveled to, and if I was walking down the street randomly one day and somebody said, for example, Gustavus, Alaska, my mind would go back to that time when I lived there for a few summers. So Lanyard does this for him, and it sends him back to this memory of building this kind of interlaced, braided plastic thing at camp, something you usually do out of boredom, something that's repetitive, monotonous, and then at the end doesn't really have much use. And he gives that to his mother as a gift for everything that he's been given by her. And he says at the end, this isn't necessary. This is another gift to my mother. This poem is literally a gift to my mother. Not to say that you can never repay your parents, but that at that moment, when he was a kid and he handed the lanyard over, he really thought that they were even. That's a really interesting idea. It makes me think about what I knew about parenting as just being a child, and then what I've learned about parenting having 2 kids now myself. You never really know how much time and effort is put into you by a parent, and you probably never will know. And if it wasn't a parent, it could be somebody else in your life fulfilling those roles as well. But you learn about that when you in turn take care of other people, and usually that doesn't occur until much later in life. And so here you got this kid giving his mother a lanyard thinking, hey, we're all good. But in reality, it was almost an act of ignorance to think that he could ever repay his mother for those, everything she's given him. Now for this poem, it's got an interesting idea. It's got a few interesting ideas. Ideas about language, ideas about memory, ideas about parent relationships. And when I think back on all of the characters we've read this semester, from the short stories, from the novel, from the play, even from the poems from last week, there are certainly some characters that would benefit from reading this poem. Now, in particular, I'm thinking about Jing-Mei from Two Kinds, who battled her mother throughout that story about piano lessons, about multiplication tables, state capitals. She needed to be a prodigy. She needed to be successful. She needed to be an obedient child. And she pushed back against that. She couldn't see the value in what her mother was trying to instill in her. I think she would benefit from reading the lanyard for a number of reasons. One, this poem would express to her how much parents literally do for their children. The basic foundations of life, things like clothing, food, and shelter. This poem kind of has ideas about that in there. And 2, we have an idea about memory. And I think memory is also a theme in Two Kinds. How Jing-Mei looks back on her life as a child, and in how she looks at it when she is at the end of that story, playing the piano, probably in her mid-30s, reflecting on her relationship with her mother. This poem has some ideas in that about that as well. And I would recommend it to Jing-Mei because I think she would benefit from it. This is what you're going to be doing for your discussion assignment. You're going to choose a couple poems, give a short synopsis or summary of their ideas. What big idea is there? What interesting images or language does the poem use? And then finally, which character from the short stories, from the novel, from the play, or even from the poems last week would benefit from reading that poem and why. This is kind of a review for next week's assignment. For this week, you're looking at poems, and you're going to be recommending them to characters. For next week, you're going to be writing your final reflection piece. And this is an essay assignment that's a personal essay assignment. It's, not necessarily an academic one per se. I'm asking you to use a few quotes from the works that you choose to discuss. But besides that, you're going to be talking about your personal connections to the characters, to the settings, to the plots, to the work that we've read this semester. If you remember week 1, and I'm sure you do, how could you not? Week 1 we read Why Literature by Mario Vargas Llosa. And he's got a great quote in that essay. It goes something like this. The greatest power that literature has is in the capacity for us to recognize ourselves in characters and settings and plots. no matter how different those characters are in terms of profession, in terms of place, in terms of time, in terms of description. We can recognize who we are in other people. And in doing that, we create empathy and we create compassion. I want you to think back on the characters, on the plots, on the settings, on the things that we've read this semester, and choose a few that you recognize yourself in. It could be a character that you recognize yourself in. It could be a situation that you recognize yourself in. It could be a setting that you recognize yourself in, your experiences in. You're going to be reflecting on those reflections, on those connections, and then quoting from those works as well. You can look at that assignment in week 16. There's also an extra credit assignment that's worth 20 points. That's one quiz and one discussion, or a couple quizzes, a couple discussions you might have missed along the way. And that is another one that asks you to reflect on the characters and on the plots and on the settings that we've read this semester. Take a look at that. Both of those assignments are due on December 18th. That's next week. This week you're going to be working on that poetry assignment. That's just a combined poem and a discussion and quiz assignment. All right. I think that's what I got for you this week. I hope you're doing well. I hope you've been safe. And I wish you all the best. Good luck reflecting on the characters this week. And we can use some of this as prep work for our work next week. All right. Take care.